In the palm of your hand, it feels heavy. 8 grams of almost pure sunlight. This is the Daric. Before this coin, money was a vague concept, a cow, a sack of grain, or a jagged lump of unrefined silver. But the Persian king Darius realized that true power isn't just the ability to destroy, it's the ability to standardize. He didn't just mint a coin, he minted trust. This single piece of gold could travel 2,000 miles, from the Mediterranean coast to the Indus River, and its value would never fluctuate. It was the first time the world agreed on a single price for a human life, a soldier's loyalty, or a kingdom's peace. Today, we follow the trail of this gold to see how the Persians built the first global economic engine. Imagine the market in Sardis circa 550 BCE. It's a sensory assault. Smells of spice and livestock, but the loudest sound is the arguing. One man offers a Babylonian shekel, another offers an Egyptian deban. They aren't just haggling over the price. They are haggling over the ruler used to measure the price. Scales were rigged with lead weights. Silver was salted with copper. Trade was a localized, high-friction game of survival. If you were a merchant, you didn't travel far because your money lost its power the moment you crossed a city wall. The world was economically fractured, a series of isolated islands in a sea of barter. It was a ceiling on human progress that only a visionary could shatter. You know, when most conquerors build an empire, they leave a trail of fire and destruction. But Cyrus the Great, he took a completely different approach. When he swept across the Middle East, he didn't burn cities or plunder temples. Instead, he protected them. He understood something revolutionary for his time. A stable empire is a prosperous one for everyone. Think about it. In Babylon, he famously allowed the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem. But here's the kicker. He didn't just give them permission, he gave them funding to rebuild their temple. By respecting local economies and their treasuries, he ensured that wealth flowed towards his capital, not underground. He was like the good cop of ancient history, proving that liberation could be the smartest way to open new markets. He laid the foundation for one of the greatest empires ever, not with a sword, but with an open hand. When Darius the Great took the throne, he didn't inherit an empire. He inherited a chaotic collection of receipts. To him, the world wasn't a battlefield, it was a ledger. He was the first ruler to see himself as a CEO, not just a conqueror. Looking at his vast territory, he saw a massive system leak. Wealth was disappearing due to corruption, local warlords, and just plain inefficient management. His goal was simple: total visibility. He wanted to know exactly how much oil was produced in Elam and how many horses were bred in Media, down to the last detail. So, he started a massive administrative overhaul, turning the Persian court into something incredible: the world's very first centralized data processing center. This wasn't just about power. It was about efficiency and control on a scale as seen before. How were ancient empires actually able to effectively run things? It wasn't just about conquering. It was about organizing. Darius the Great of Persia, he drew lines on the map that would last for centuries, carving his massive empire into 20 provinces, or satrapies. But these weren't just random divisions. They were designed for one thing: tax efficiency. Each satrapy had a governor, called a satrap, to keep the peace. But here's the genius part: Darius also appointed a separate secretary and a tax collector in each province, and they reported directly to him, the king. Think of it as ancient checks and balances. No governor could skim money off the top, because the king's own accountants were always watching. It was essentially a franchise model for an empire. Every branch manager, or satrap, had a strict revenue goal to meet. This brilliant structure created a level of political and financial stability the world hadn't seen in ages. But how do you tax a world you haven't measured? Darius sent out the first imperial surveyors. They carried measuring cords and clay tablets, mapping the quality of the soil and the yield of the harvest. They didn't just tax people, they taxed the potential of the land. If a field was fertile, the tax was high. If it was fallow, the tax was adjusted. This was the birth of the property tax. They documented every vineyard, every olive grove, and every canal. This data was sent back to the central archives, creating a master plan that allowed the king to predict his wealth years in advance. It was the end of guesswork economics. The numbers were staggering. According to the historian Herodotus, Babylon paid an annual tribute of 1,000 silver talents. Egypt paid 700. The Indus Valley, the wealthiest frontier, paid 360 talents of gold dust. In total, the king's annual revenue was estimated at 14,500 silver talents. To put that in perspective, a single talent was enough to pay a crew of sailors for a month. We're talking about a cash flow that could build cities from scratch and fund armies of 100,000 men without breaking a sweat. This wasn't just a government. It was the wealthiest entity to ever exist on the planet up to that point. Ever wondered about the story behind one of history's most famous coins? Let's dive into the world of the Persian Daric. Around 520 BC, King Darius the Great took the throne of the massive Achaemenid Empire. He was a brilliant administrator and realized he needed a standardized currency to unify his vast territories and boost trade. So, he introduced the Daric, a thick gold coin of exceptional purity, weighing about 8.4 grams. Imagine the impact. For the first time, merchants from India to Greece had a reliable, high-value coin they could trust. Each Daric was stamped with the image of the Persian king, a powerful symbol of imperial authority and economic stability. This wasn't just money. It was a revolution in commerce. The Daric fueled international trade, funded massive construction projects like the Royal Road, and paid the soldiers who guarded the empire. It became the ancient world's dollar, a testament to Darius's vision. Look closely at the image on the coin. It's not a portrait of a face, it's an action shot. The king is in a half-kneeling position, holding a bow in one hand and a spear in the other. He is the archer. This was a calculated piece of propaganda. It told every merchant, my protection is active, my reach is long, my eyes are on this coin. In an era where most people were illiterate, the coin was the king's most effective press release. It circulated in the pockets of the poor and the vaults of the rich, a constant reminder that the king was the source of all prosperity. It was the first global brand logo. While the gold Daric moved between kings and generals, the silver siglos moved between bakers and cobblers. One Daric was worth exactly 20 sigloi. This fixed exchange rate was revolutionary. It allowed for small change in a way that made daily life easier for the middle class. A soldier could buy a cloak, a farmer could buy a new plough, and a tavern owner could give change for a flagon of wine. This liquidity, the ability to buy small things easily, is what actually grows an economy from the bottom up. The siglos was the grease in the gears of the Persian machine, ensuring that even the smallest transactions supported the grand imperial design. Currency is only as powerful as its velocity. To keep the Daric moving, Darius engineered the Royal Road, a 1,600-mile artery of stone and packed gravel. It wasn't just a path, it was the world's first logistical superhighway. Stretching from Susa in the Persian heartland to Sardis near the Mediterranean, it bypassed mountains and bridged rivers that had once been impassable. This road took the friction out of the world. A merchant caravan that once took 3 months to navigate the bandit-ridden trails could now make the journey in weeks of relative safety. It was the physical skeleton that held the economic muscles of the empire together. But the true genius of the road was the chapar khane, the postal stations. Every 15 miles, a station stood with fresh horses and a stable. Darius created a relay system that was the ancient equivalent of 5G. A messenger, or chapar, would ride his horse to the point of collapse, leap onto a fresh mount, and keep going. Herodotus famously marveled, neither snow, nor rain, nor heat stays these couriers. A message or a tax report could travel the length of the empire in just 7 to 9 days. In a world where information usually moved at the speed of a walking ox, the Persians were living in the future. Moving vast quantities of gold required more than just fast horses. It required absolute security. The royal road was patrolled by the Immortals, the elite 10,000-man royal guard. To rob a tax caravan was to invite the personal wrath of the King of Kings. This state-sponsored security meant that for the first time, a merchant didn't need to hire a private army. By providing safety as a public service, Darius effectively lowered the cost of doing business across 3 continents. The road became a safe haven for capital, encouraging the wealthy to reinvest their Darics into new trade ventures. All roads eventually led to Persepolis. This wasn't just a palace, it was the world's central bank. Beneath the grand staircases lay massive subterranean vaults. When Alexander the Great eventually captured the city, he reportedly needed 10,000 pairs of mules and 5,000 camels to carry away the loot. We're talking about a concentration of liquid wealth that had never been seen before. It was the Fort Knox of antiquity, a physical manifestation of the taxes collected from millions of people, stored in standardized bars of silver and jars of gold Darics, waiting to be deployed for the next great project. But how did they track it all? In the ruins of Persepolis, archaeologists found the fortification tablets, thousands of clay spreadsheets. These aren't tales of gods, they are payroll records. They show that the Persians didn't use slave labor to build their palaces. They used paid contractors. We see records of wine rations for masons and silver payments to female supervisors. This was a sophisticated, documented labor market. Every loaf of bread and every jar of grain was accounted for with a cylinder seal. It was a bureaucracy so precise it would make a modern auditor proud. Globalization in the ancient world. Long before the internet or airplanes, the Persian Empire created something amazing called the Pax Persica, or Persian Peace. For nearly 200 years, they built a massive network of safe roads stretching thousands of miles. Imagine traveling from Greece to India without fearing bandits. But how did they make it all work? With a brilliant idea, a standardized currency. The Persian Daric, a gold coin, became the universal dollar of its time. This meant a Greek merchant, an Egyptian artisan, and a Babylonian trader could all do business easily. This economic boom wasn't just about money. It brought different cultures together, sharing ideas, art, and knowledge. The Pax Persica shows us that when people can trade and travel safely, peace and prosperity often follow. The ultimate proof of the Daric's power was the Greek mercenary. The city-states of Athens and Sparta were often at war with Persia, yet their soldiers refused to be paid in anything but Persian gold. These hoplites knew that a silver drachma from Athens might be worthless in a month, but a Persian Daric was forever. The Persians used this to their advantage, often fighting wars without ever swinging a sword. They simply bribed Greek politicians and hired Greek generals. The Greeks had a saying, "The king's archers have conquered us," referring not to the soldiers, but to the archer stamped on the gold coins. But even the greatest engine can overheat. By the time of Xerxes and his successors, the cost of maintaining the royal road, the massive navy, and the sprawling bureaucracy began to catch up. To keep the treasury full, taxes were raised. The golden standard became a golden noose for the provinces. When the money stopped circulating and started sitting idle in the Persepolis vaults, the economy began to seize up. Wealth inequality grew, and the satraps, the regional CEOs, started looking for ways to keep more of the profit for themselves. The centralized trust that Darius built was beginning to fracture at the edges. In 334 BC, the system met its match. A young king named Alexander crossed into Asia. He didn't just bring an army. He brought a different economic philosophy. Alexander knew that if he could seize the Persian treasuries at Susa and Persepolis, he could pay his own debts and flood the world with the hoarded Persian gold. He wasn't just conquering land. He was performing a hostile takeover of the world's largest corporation. As the Persian gates fell, the massive hoards of gold were released back into the market all at once, causing a global inflationary spike. The era of the archer was over. The Persian Empire fell, but the Darius blueprint survived. Every empire that followed, from the Romans to the British, copied the Persian model of standardized currency, postal roads, and centralized taxation. They proved that you don't lead the world through force alone, you lead it through the ledger. But as we'll see in the next episode, Iran's story as a global middleman was just beginning. The gold Darics may have melted away, but a new luxury was rising in the east that would once again make Iran the center of the world's wealth. Silk. Join us next time as we follow the money into the age of the Shahs.